My dear listeners, this is an original sci-fi story I wrote for you. If you'd like to support me, just subscribe to the channel, it really helps the growth. The package arrived on a Wednesday, which was already suspicious. Diplomatic vessels operated on supply schedules as rigid and predictable as orbital mechanics, and Wednesday was not a scheduled delivery day. The fact that it arrived anyway meant someone had called in a favor, which meant the contents mattered to someone, which meant Senior Attaché Delia Okafor was going to have to sign 17 additional forms before the week was out. She signed them without complaint. The package was from her mother. It was a large box, poorly taped in the way of someone who trusted love to compensate for inadequate adhesion, and it contained 2 jars of groundnut soup base, a knitted item of ambiguous purpose but clear affection, a photograph of the family dog looking accusatory, 3 novels she'd already read, and approximately 8 meters of bubble wrap, deployed with the protective generosity of someone who had packed the whole thing herself and wanted nothing to break. Delia set the box on the table in the crew lounge, pried off the top, and began excavating. She did not notice the cubs arrive. The Vakran cohort assigned to the Harmony's Edge for this diplomatic rotation was 7 strong, ranging in age from what the briefing documents estimated as equivalent to 9 human years up to approximately 14. Their lead cub was a male named Savrik, whose deep jade scales and double silver crest markings indicated, depending on which cultural reference document you consulted, either future high command or exceptional hunting lineage, possibly both. The documents were, as always, usefully vague. They had been given unsupervised access to the crew lounge as a trust-building exercise suggested by Senior Liaison Hale, who was off-ship for a summit and had left Delia a note that said they're fine. Just don't let them near the engineering bay and nothing else. The first pop stopped Delia's hands mid-excavation. She had squeezed a bubble without thinking, the way humans did, the way humans always had since the first sheet of bubble wrap emerged from its manufacturing origin in 1957 as a failed wallpaper and accidentally became one of humanity's most enduring minor pleasures. The sound was crisp and small and deeply satisfying. She looked up. All 7 cubs had gone absolutely still. Savrik was closest, 3 meters away, his jade scales prickling into the slightly raised configuration that the briefing documents called heightened alert and that Delia's instincts called do not make any sudden movements. His double crest was fully elevated. His eyes, which could track prey across a kilometer of dense jungle canopy, were fixed on the bubble wrap with an intensity that made the bubble wrap seem, briefly, threatening. "It's packaging material," Delia said, "from a box, to protect things during transport." Savrik did not respond. He was looking at the bubble wrap the way a mathematician looks at an equation that almost resolves. Delia recognized the expression because she had 3 sisters and they all made it too. "The sound," said a smaller cub near the back, a female named Kaith whose pale rust scales were still coming in at the edges. "What made the sound?" "Air," Delia said. "Each bubble is a small sealed pocket of air. When you apply pressure, the material ruptures and the air escapes. It makes a here." She held up the sheet and pressed another bubble between her thumb and forefinger. Pop! The cubs flinched in unison. Then, as nothing else happened, they all leaned incrementally forward. Savrik took 3 steps toward the table. He stopped an arm's length from the bubble wrap and lowered his head to examine it at close range, his nostrils working. After a long moment he said, in the careful measured tone that Delia associated with Vakran processing of genuinely new information, "Small chambers. Each contains something." "Air," Delia said. "Just air." "And you broke it," Savrik said. "Not accusatory. Observational. Released it. The air escapes when the chamber pops." "And then?" Savrik looked at the flattened bubble she had pressed. "It cannot be restored." "No. Once they're popped, they're gone. That's sort of the point, I suppose. Or the side effect, depending on how you look at it." Savrik straightened up and looked at her directly. "You released them without ceremony," he said. Delia blinked. "I was getting the soup base out of the box. You did not mark the release." "There's nothing to mark. They're air bubbles in polyethylene. My mother uses it to protect the jars." Savrik looked back at the bubble wrap. His crest, which had lowered slightly during the conversation, came back up. "Among the Vakran," he said slowly, in the register that meant he was translating carefully, The hunt priest marks the last breath of worthy prey, not because the prey was sacred, because the breath was real. It existed. It was contained within living flesh, and then it was not. He paused. The marking says, "This was here. Now it is elsewhere. This moment is witnessed." Delia looked at her bubble wrap. Savrik looked at her bubble wrap. "They're not alive," she said. "The air within them was sealed," Savrik said. "Contained. Separated from all other air at the moment of making. Each one has existed, alone, since the day your mother wrapped her gift for you." He paused again. "And you released them while thinking of something else." Delia felt, unexpectedly and somewhat absurdly, a small pang of guilt. She set down the sheet of bubble wrap. "All right," she said. "What would the marking look like?" Savrik's crest shifted into a configuration she didn't have a reference document entry for. After a moment she identified it, from context, as satisfaction. He picked up the bubble wrap. He held it with both hands, which given the size differential required a fairly delicate grip, and carried it to the center of the room with the focused solemnity of someone carrying something that had just been promoted. He set it on the low table near the seating area. The other cubs drifted inward without instruction, arranging themselves in a loose half-ring. Savrik placed one claw above a bubble. He held it there, not pressing, hovering. "State what was contained," he said. Delia, who was beginning to feel she had stepped into a ritual that had no exits, said, "Air." "From where?" From wherever my mother packed it." "Lagos. Earth. Her kitchen, probably." "Air from the kitchen of your birth family's home," Savrik said, in his formal register. "Sealed on the day of the sending. Carried across 3 sectors in the dark interior of the gift." He looked at the other cubs. The trapped spirit of home. "Oh no," Delia thought with great clarity. "May its release be witnessed," Savrik said. He pressed his claw down. Pop. The cubs made a sound she had never heard before. It was brief and unanimous. A single soft exhalation, almost a word, rendered untranslatable by the translator chip. Savrik moved his claw to the next bubble. He did not speak again. He simply pressed, and the cubs marked each one with that brief exhalation, and Delia sat on the edge of the table and watched 8 meters of bubble wrap get ceremonially liberated over the course of the next 11 minutes. They were methodical about it. Savrik did the first row, then passed the sheet to the cub on his left. Each cub took a section. Kaith, the youngest, held her portion very carefully and pressed each bubble with the tip of one claw, her rust scales flushing slightly warmer with concentration. When she was done, she passed it on without looking up, still processing. The last section went to a middle cub named Drath, who was wide and quiet and had said nothing the entire time. He pressed his bubbles one by one and then held up the last bubble, flat and already half deflated from handling, between 2 claws. He looked at Delia. "This one," he said. "You should do this one." "Why?" "It was your mother who sealed them. The last release should be family." Delia crossed the room and sat down across from Drath. She reached out and pressed her thumb against the last bubble. It resisted briefly, then gave with a pop smaller and softer than the rest, almost gentle. Nobody made the exhalation sound for that one. The room was quiet. After a moment, Savrik said, "She packed them with care." "She always does," Delia said. She was looking at the now entirely flat sheet of polyethylene, which looked very small and ordinary now that its purpose was complete. "She wraps everything like it might not survive the journey, even when she knows it will." "That is love," Savrik said, with the simple certainty of someone stating a navigational fact. "The excessive preparation that does not trust distance." Delia laughed, slightly unsteadily. "Yes, that's exactly what it is." She made them all groundnut soup from one of the jars, because it seemed appropriate, and because she needed something to do with her hands. The cubs sat around the crew lounge table and ate it in the careful, exploratory way of creatures encountering a new taste and giving it serious consideration. Savrik declared it complex and worthy. Kaith asked for more. Drath said nothing but held out his bowl a second time, which Delia had learned was Vakrin for the same thing. When their guardian came to collect them 2 hours later, Savrik paused in the doorway and looked back at Delia. We will need to know, he said, how the small air chambers are made. The process of the sealing. It's a manufacturing process. Industrial. There are machines. We will need to know, Savrik repeated patiently, so that we can make them correctly. For the ceremony of the last breath. Delia's communicator was already buzzing. She looked at it. Juno Hale, back from the summit, impeccably timed as always. Delia, there is a formal cultural inquiry from the Vakran Ministry of Ancestral Rights regarding the acquisition of what they are calling the sealed spirit chambers of remembrance. They want manufacturing specifications. They have also asked whether human air specifically carries different ceremonial significance or if any planetary atmosphere functions equally. A pause. This has your fingerprints on it. Delia looked at the flat, empty sheet of bubble wrap still on the table, and at the bowl of groundnut soup she'd made from her mother's recipe, and at the door through which 7 cubs had just walked back out into the galaxy. Atmospheric source probably matters to them, she typed back. For what it's worth, I think it should be home air. Whatever home means to the person packing. A long pause. That is either the most diplomatic thing you've ever said or you've started a religion, Juno replied. Delia picked up the empty bubble wrap and folded it very small. Maybe both, she typed. She put the folded sheet in her pocket. She wasn't sure why. Something about Drath holding up that last bubble, the deliberate passing of the decision back to family. Something about excessive preparation that doesn't trust distance. She went to write her report. It was going to take a while.